In the early months of the campaign season, Donald Trump moved with a sense of familiarity. He had been in the spotlight for many years, long before his time in the White House, but this moment felt different for him. It felt like a second chance, a return to something unfinished. His supporters often used the word comeback, and Trump himself liked how that sounded. It suggested strength, resilience, and the ability to rise again after challenges. He believed that his voice still mattered to millions of Americans, and the reaction at his rallies seemed to confirm it. Every time he walked onto a stage, the sound of cheering reminded him that he still held a powerful influence in national politics. It gave him energy, confidence, and the feeling that his path back to the presidency was not just possible, but likely. His team could see the momentum as well. Fundraising events produced strong results, and many donors who once hesitated were now returning. They believed his political instincts, sharp media presence, and devoted supporters formed an advantage no other candidate had. Polling numbers showed him leading in some states and within close reach in others. News commentators debated his chances every day, but even those who opposed him admitted he could not be ignored. Trump paid attention to each discussion. He liked watching the interviews, the charts, the debates, especially when they suggested that he was the central figure in the race. To him, attention was a signal of relevance. If people were talking about him, then the possibility of his return remained strong. His rallies played a major role in shaping this feeling. They were large, colorful, and filled with people who felt they were part of something important. Supporters wore bright hats, held signs, and waited for hours just to hear him speak. There was laughter at his jokes, applause at his promises, and quiet moments when he shared emotional reflections. Trump noticed the faces in the crowd, the families, the elderly supporters who had stood by him for years, the young people who had recently joined his movement. He felt their energy and tried to return it through his speeches. Each rally felt like a confirmation that the connection between him and his supporters was not fading. It was still strong, still alive. Trump often told his team that winning an election was not only about policies or numbers. He believed it was about emotion, making people feel seen, valued, and included. He understood the stage. He understood timing, tone, and storytelling. Many of his advisors said his strongest ability was speaking directly to people in simple language they understood. He made complex issues feel personal. He talked about work, families, the economy, and national pride in ways that made his listeners feel like they were sitting at a table with him, not hearing from a distant politician. That style helped him during his first campaign, and his team believed it remained one of his greatest strengths. Inside the campaign headquarters, the atmosphere reflected this sense of rising confidence. Walls were covered with maps, charts, travel schedules, and lists of potential supporters. Staff members worked long hours, often late into the night, refining messages, planning events, and studying voter feedback. Many on the team spoke with pride about being part of something historic. Some had worked with Trump before, while others were new and eager to prove themselves. They understood that working with a figure like Trump brought both excitement and pressure. The pace was fast, the expectations high, and the decisions constant. Yet they remained motivated because they believed the campaign had momentum and purpose. Trump himself kept a close watch on the details. Despite his public image of confidence and boldness, he privately studied numbers very carefully. He asked questions about polling in specific counties, shifts in demographics, and trends in public opinion. He wanted to understand not just where he was strong, but where he needed to improve. Some advisors were surprised by how much time he spent examining these patterns. They said it showed his seriousness about the campaign. He did not want to leave anything to chance. He wanted to know exactly where he stood and what steps were needed to keep moving forward. His family also played an important role. They attended events, offered advice, and provided emotional support when the long travel and constant scrutiny became tiring. They understood the pressures of national politics as few others did. They had lived through it with him before, during one of the most intense periods in modern political history. They knew the schedule could be demanding, the media coverage unpredictable, and the responsibility heavy. Yet they also believed in his ability to return to the presidency. Their presence gave him strength, stability, and a sense of personal grounding amid the chaos of campaigning. As the campaign continued, conversations among supporters increasingly centered on the idea of change. Many felt that the country had shifted in ways both large and small since Trump had left the White House. Supporters often said they were looking for someone who could bring clarity, direction, or renewed confidence. Trump listened carefully to these concerns at town halls and small group discussions. He made notes, repeated their stories in his speeches, and shaped parts of his message around them. He wanted supporters to feel that he understood their everyday experiences, not only national political themes. This approach helped deepen his connection with voters and added emotional weight to his campaign narrative. Throughout all this, Trump remained aware of the challenges still ahead. Elections are unpredictable. Public opinion can change quickly. He knew this from experience. He also knew that every campaign involves unexpected events, shifts in public focus, and moments of pressure. Yet he believed his resilience set him apart. He had faced many difficult situations in his career, both in business and politics, and he had developed a mindset of persistence. When he talked to his supporters about determination, he spoke from a place of personal experience. He believed that perseverance mattered as much as strategy. By the time the first major campaign season came into full view, Trump felt that his path forward was strong. His rallies were full, his fundraising steady, and his polling competitive. There was a buzz in political circles that his potential return to the presidency could become reality. That atmosphere, combined with the loyalty of his supporters, created a sense of movement and purpose. For Trump, it felt like standing at the start of something significant. The story of his political life, once thought to be finished, now seemed to be building toward another major chapter. In his mind, the comeback was already taking shape, and every step forward added to the momentum that carried him ahead. As the campaign season continued, something began to shift in the national conversation. For weeks, the focus had been on rallies, speeches, and polling numbers, but then news started to spread about a legal question rising quietly in the background. It did not start with loud headlines or major announcements. It began in smaller conversations among legal analysts, political commentators, and state election officials. The question was whether certain parts of the Constitution could influence Donald Trump's eligibility to run for president again. At first, it seemed distant, almost theoretical. Many people assumed it would fade away like many political debates do, but instead of fading, it grew. Some states and advocacy groups raised objections that involved events connected to January 6th. They argued that certain constitutional language might apply to Trump in a way that could affect his ability to appear on ballots. Others strongly disagreed, saying that the Constitution did not restrict him and that the matter was being misinterpreted. What began as a legal conversation slowly started to move toward the courts. Trump and his team watched carefully, but they believed the issue would resolve quickly. His advisors told him that the argument was unlikely to advance very far. They reassured him that the campaign should continue as planned. Yet legal matters have a way of gaining momentum once they enter the public discussion. Soon the issue spread to more states. Different courts began hearing different versions of the same question. Each court decision created new headlines. Political talk shows started inviting legal scholars to explain what might happen. Some analysts predicted that the issue could possibly reach the Supreme Court. Others dismissed that idea as unlikely. But as weeks passed, the possibility became clearer. The issue was not going away. It was moving upward step by step. Inside Trump's campaign headquarters, the development created a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The excitement and confidence were still present, but now there was a layer of caution beneath it. Trump's legal team began holding more frequent meetings. They reviewed past cases, analyzed constitutional texts, and discussed possible outcomes. Some advisors urged Trump to address the issue publicly with strong statements. Other advisors suggested a calmer, more measured response to show seriousness and respect for the legal process. The campaign wanted to protect its momentum, but uncertainty had entered the picture. Trump followed the news closely. He read articles, listened to commentary, and asked his lawyers for explanations. His public tone remained steady and confident, but privately he understood the seriousness of a case reaching the highest court in the country. A Supreme Court hearing is never a small issue. It means that the matter has national significance, and whatever the court decides will carry weight across the entire political landscape. Trump was aware that even if he continued to campaign fully, the conversation about the case could influence public perception. Meanwhile, supporters reacted in different ways. Some were worried. They feared that legal decisions could change what would happen in the election, before voters even had the chance to cast their ballots. Others believed that Trump would overcome the challenge and that the case itself would strengthen his position by rallying additional sympathy and support. At rallies, people discussed the situation in line before Trump spoke. They asked each other what they thought would happen, what the courts might decide, and how the campaign would respond. There was uncertainty, but there was also loyalty. Many supporters said they would stand with Trump no matter what. The news media devoted extensive time to the issue. Reporters explained the background of the case, the constitutional arguments, and the possible impacts on the election. Some programs featured experts who debated passionately about historical meaning and legal interpretation. Others discussed how the case reflected broader political tensions in the country. Trump watched these discussions with interest. He often analyzed not only what people were saying, but how they were saying it. He believed that tone, confidence, and presentation could influence public opinion just as much as facts and data. The moment that changed everything came when the Supreme Court officially agreed to hear the case. The announcement was covered across every major news outlet. It became the lead story on television, radio, and online platforms. Even people who did not follow politics closely heard about it. The campaign headquarters received a wave of messages from supporters, journalists, and elected officials asking what would happen next. Staff members felt the shift immediately. The conversation was no longer only about rallies and policies. It was now about the legal future of Trump's candidacy. Trump woke up the next morning to headlines centered on the Supreme Court hearing. It felt like a turning point. The election was still ongoing and the campaign was still active, but now there was another element shaping the direction of events. Trump understood that the Supreme Court was a different kind of arena. It was a place where emotional arguments mattered far less than legal reasoning. Judges there did not consider campaign energy or polling momentum. They considered interpretation, precedent, and constitutional meaning. The outcome would not be influenced by crowd size or rally excitement. His advisors immediately began preparing. They organized legal arguments, drafted statements, and formed communication plans. They wanted to present a message of calm confidence. They emphasized that Trump respected the legal system and trusted the process. They reminded supporters that legal cases take time and that patience was necessary. The campaign continued to schedule rallies and public appearances. But now every action took place under the awareness of the upcoming Supreme Court decision. Trump himself approached the situation with a combination of strength and seriousness. He continued to speak to his supporters with energy and focus, reminding them that the campaign remained on track. Yet he also acknowledged that the case represented an important moment for the nation. He said that he believed voters should have the power to choose leaders through elections, not through legal interpretation alone. His words resonated with many who felt that the case was about something larger than one candidate. It was about the role of public choice in democracy. As weeks passed and the hearing date approached, the uncertainty deepened. The campaign could not predict the outcome. Legal experts on television often disagreed with one another, each offering different interpretations and forecasts. The public conversations grew more intense and emotions on all sides ran high. But through all of it, the campaign continued moving. Travel schedules were completed, rallies held, and supporters greeted. Trump understood that in times of uncertainty, leadership meant showing steadiness and forward movement. Yet the reality remained. The Supreme Court case now sat like a quiet weight in the background of every decision. It influenced strategy, messaging, and planning. It shaped how donors responded and how political allies positioned themselves. It created a sense of waiting, of expectation, of something unknown just beyond the horizon. Even though Trump continued to campaign with determination, he knew that the legal question could become a central factor in the race. This was not the end of the campaign. It was not even a pause, but it was a change, a moment when confidence met complexity, when momentum met uncertainty. The path forward was still open, but it was no longer smooth. Something important was coming, and everyone involved in the campaign could feel it. The future of the election now depended not only on rallies, voters, and speeches, but on a court that would soon make a decision watched by the entire nation. When the news of the Supreme Court hearing spread, it created a wave of conversations across the country. People discussed it in homes, workplaces, community centers, and online spaces. Some saw it as a historical moment, something that could set a new direction in politics. Others felt uneasy. worried that legal decisions could shape the outcome of an election rather than the voters themselves. No matter which side people stood on, one thing was clear. The situation had become more serious and more complicated. Inside Trump's campaign, the change could be felt every day. The staff continued their work, holding meetings, reviewing schedules, and preparing events. But the tone of conversations had become more careful and more thoughtful. People chose their words more slowly. They understood that the next steps required not only strategy but also patience. The campaign had always been energetic and fast-paced, but now there was a quieter layer of planning, happening alongside the public movement. Trump's advisors divided into different groups. One group focused on legal strategy, working directly with lawyers to prepare arguments and responses. They studied past Supreme Court cases, reading carefully to understand how similar issues had been handled in history. They discussed legal interpretations and possible outcomes. They knew that the Supreme Court did not make decisions based on emotion or popularity. It based them on constitutional reasoning. So the legal team focused on clarity and precision. Another group worked on public messaging. They needed to explain the situation to supporters in a way that was confident but calm. They did not want to create fear or frustration. They believed that supporters would remain loyal if they understood that the process was part of the legal system. So they prepared statements, speeches, and talking points to help keep the campaign focused and steady. Some advisors, however, expressed concern about how the uncertainty might affect momentum. Campaigns often rely on energy, crowd excitement, news attention, strong headlines. When uncertainty takes over, it can slow progress. People hesitate. Some wait before donating. Some wait before volunteering. Even strong supporters can feel unsure about what will happen next. The advisors discussed these concerns in private, not to discourage the campaign, but to make sure they understood the landscape clearly. Trump himself continued to travel and speak, but he could feel the change as well. Even in large rallies with cheering crowds, there were moments of stillness when he reflected on the situation. He knew that leadership meant facing uncertainty with steadiness. He believed that maintaining confidence was important, not only for himself but for everyone who supported him. He reminded his team that campaigns often have difficult chapters, and this was simply one of them. Meanwhile, television networks, newspapers, and online platforms discussed the case every day. Some news programs invited legal scholars who explained the constitutional arguments from different viewpoints. Some commentators said that the case was about protecting democratic principles. Others argued that the case raised concerns about fairness and voter choice. The discussions were wide-ranging, thoughtful, and often emotional. The nation was watching, waiting, and trying to understand what the Supreme Court might do. The campaign headquarters received messages from supporters across the country. Some wrote letters expressing encouragement and hope. Others shared stories about why they believed the election mattered to them personally. Many said they were praying for clarity and fairness in the legal process. These messages gave the campaign emotional strength. They reminded Trump and his team that beyond the legal arguments and political strategies, there were millions of individuals who believed their voices mattered. However, uncertainty continued to grow. Each day felt like it contained two layers, the public layer of rallies and speeches and the private layer of waiting for the court's decision. The waiting was not easy. Time seemed to move slowly. Every new headline brought fresh speculation. Some analysts predicted one outcome, while others predicted the opposite. The lack of clarity created a sense of tension, like holding a breath and not knowing when to release it. Among advisors, different ideas emerged about how to manage the situation. Some believed that the campaign should increase public activity and keep the energy high. They argued that strong rallies and public appearances would help supporters feel confident and motivated. They believed momentum itself could create positive influence. Others believed that too much public attention might distract from the legal case. They suggested a more measured approach, fewer rallies, more private meetings, and a quiet tone. They argued that calmness could show strength and discipline during a serious moment. Trump listened to both sides. He understood the importance of energy in a campaign, but he also recognized the symbolic weight of a Supreme Court case. He tried to balance both perspectives. He continued to speak publicly with confidence, but he also demonstrated respect for the legal process. He wanted his supporters to feel hopeful and strong, not anxious or discouraged. As the hearing date approached, the emotional intensity increased. Reporters asked more questions. Commentators analyzed every detail. People in grocery stores, coffee shops, and community gatherings talked about the case. It was not just a legal matter now. It had become a national discussion about democracy, authority, and leadership. Trump's supporters prepared themselves for whatever would come. Some organized gatherings to show unity and encouragement. Others created networks to share news and updates calmly, avoiding dramatic reactions. They said they believed that steady support mattered more now than ever. Many supporters expressed loyalty not just to Trump personally, but to the idea that elections should be decided by voters. Meanwhile, opponents also followed the case closely. They believed the outcome could shape the future of political norms. They expressed their own hopes for what the court might decide. The national conversation included many voices, many perspectives, and many emotions. Yet the legal process continued in its own deliberate, careful way, separate from the public debate. In the final days before the hearing, Trump reflected quietly more often. He thought about his first campaign, his presidency, and everything that had happened since. He remembered the challenges he had faced, the accomplishments he had made, and the lessons he had learned. He understood that leadership required not only strength, but also patience. He told his staff that no matter what happened, they should treat the moment with dignity and respect. Even though the future was uncertain, the campaign did not stop. Rallies continued. Voters continued to show support. Conversations continued across the country. The movement remained active and alive. The uncertainty, however, now sat at the center of everything, shaping decisions, strategies, and emotions. What made this moment so powerful was not only the legal question itself. It was the feeling that something larger was happening, something that touched the core of how leadership, law, and democracy interact. The campaign moved forward, but every step carried the awareness that the Supreme Court's decision, whenever it came, would shift the path ahead in ways no one could fully predict. The nation was waiting. The campaign was waiting. Trump was waiting. The future remained open, but the ground beneath it was now uncertain.